So what up, though? It's Dwan Dandridge back with another episode of Speak for Yourself. Of course, we have Saginaw's finest, Mr. Ken Elkins in the building.
What's happening?
And a very special friend of both of ours, and definitely the organization, the one and only Doug Bitonti Stewart. Now,
Doug, you fresh.
Did I get the Bitonti Stewart?
You did, man.
You
nailed it.
Yeah, yeah. Sweet. You probably our only subscriber, so you know.
I've seen them all.
You've seen them all.
So
you know that we invite our guests to introduce themselves. So
yeah.
How would you like our viewers, meaning you, to know yourself?
Yeah. And by the way, Malik Yakini, there will not be a better self-introduction than Malik Yakini.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Fire. So Doug Bitonti Stewart. I did work on this, man. I even put something together.
That's what's up.
Yeah, so take this serious. Son of Nancy and Cyrus. So my mom was a guidance counselor secretary when I was growing up. And then she went and got her master's and became a therapist. Oh, cool. And so, and she taught me empathy and how to forgive. My dad was Sparty from 1959 to 1963.
Oh, he was?
Son of Sparty.
Oh, wow.
I haven't told you that like 6 times.
No, yeah, I don't think you have told me that.
All right, well,
wow.
Son of Sparty from 1959 to 63. And, you know, he made a lot of good moves, but he also made some big mistakes. And so he taught me a bit about how to serve in an effort to be forgiven. So that's really important. Brother to Scott and Mary. Husband to Sandra Bitonti Stewart. That's where Bitonti comes from.
Okay.
So that's her family name, and she was kind enough, and her parents, to share with me their name. So that's where Bitonti comes from. And I describe her, you know, she's my life partner. We'll be 30 years in the fall.
Wow.
So, I mean, how can I introduce myself without talking about her, right? So I oftentimes say that she's like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and I'm like the husband. But it turns out Ruth Bader Ginsburg's husband cooked and things.
Yeah.
I don't.
You don't do that?
Not well. But so she is an absolute amazing leader. She makes more impact in a quarter than I do in a year. Easy. So she's dedicated her life not only to our kids, but also to ensuring that that women have access to all of the healthcare needs that they have when they're prenatal, postnatal, the relationship between children and kids, all of women's health rights, including abortion rights and so on. And she, for the last 7 or 8 years, has been working alongside and following Black leadership in helping to establish the first ever birth center by and for Black women here in Detroit.
Oh, wow.
Birth Detroit.
Oh, that's what's called Birth Detroit?
Birth Detroit.
And it's already set up and established?
It's in construction.
Okay, nice.
So they're super close. I think they've raised like $9 million so far for it.
Dope.
It's awesome. And Leslie Welch, the leader there, amazing woman leader. And so both Sandra and I have been following her.
Nice.
And then I'm father to Melanie and Giuliano, the adult kids that I'm super proud of. And I would describe myself as an optimistic servant leader that's persistent in wanting to make long-lasting, even if incremental, positive social impact. And I'm shooting for systemic impact. And part of that is my work in following Black Leaders Detroit. And following Black Leaders Detroit. And my focus is on justice, or in the Jewish tradition, we'll call it tzedakah. Even though I'm not Jewish, I know you guys know that, but work for a Jewish family, tzedakah. And also to repair our world, which is tikkun olam in Hebrew. So these are some of my core values. So, yeah, that's me in a very prepared way. Thank you for the gift of allowing me to introduce myself.
No, I mean, we welcome you too. And for anybody that's wondering why we didn't have Sandra on instead. We reached out to her and she said,
She's busy.
Doug, she's too busy. She
said Doug instead.
She's like, Doug got time.
That's right. That's right.
And we were like,
right.
maybe we'll get them on. Maybe
That's
not.
right. Oh man, I have something. All right.
We was like, what about your kids? Can your kids come on? No, they busy too.
That's right.
I guess we'll do Doug then.
As you can tell that we are like good friends. I think we've been knowing each other for maybe 6 years.
Yep, I think so.
Maybe 6 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think I observed about you, Doug, is that you tend to like go deep in friendship and relationship with folk. And like are consistently looking for ways to like use the privilege that you have to like assist others that may not have had the same amount of privilege. And that's, more rare than I wish it was. Where does that come from? Like, I don't think I've ever asked you, like, where did that come from? What was is there a moment in time or something that was a great awakening that sent your life in this direction?
So I would share two briefly. So I grew up in a small town outside of another small town called Okemos. And it wasn't until I was in college that people were starting to, I was in student government, people were starting to sort of say, I shouldn't use words like guys because there are more than just guys in the room and things like that. But it wasn't until in my professional career when I was working in Detroit at Children's Hospital of Michigan where I started to really see the difference in terms of outcomes for kids and how different they were just based on the zip codes they were born in. So whether it was Brightmoor that I've gotten to know much better now, and I know you grew up in the last like 16 years where we've been doing work there, kids that were born in that zip code had such a different set of opportunities and outcomes than kids that were born in my zip code. But, I was this is probably 15 years ago, I was at a philanthropy conference, a family philanthropy conference. And this family was talking about that they actually there were a bunch of stories about where their money came from, but nobody really knew what the true story was. So one of their family members started digging in. And a very long story short, they found out that they had been involved in enslaving other people. And so they were in the slave trade. And they did this whole long effort where they actually went to the African continent and they were going to do a forgiveness tour. So I'm watching this as a white man, watching a white family on video do this, and I thought, man, this is really interesting. I wonder how it's going to go, And it went really horrible for that family. That family started disintegrating, was falling apart, and during this trip, they ended up in Haiti because after abolition, the family kept trading in human beings. And finally, they turned to the camera and said, will you talk with us? And turns out there was a filmmaker with them who happened to be a black woman, and she sat down and said, this is not going to be in the film. I told you it wasn't going to be in this film. And they said, what are we doing wrong? And she said, why did you go all the way to the African continent to say you're sorry for this, when what you need to do is take all this information and talk to other white people like you about what it is that you were involved in, how it's impacted your family, what you're doing with your philanthropy, or maybe what you're doing in other places. You don't need to talk to people in Africa or on the African continent about this. Why don't you talk to your own? And I was like, like that is not what I saw coming. And then without going too long, when I started working at the Fisher Foundation and we took a tour of a number of neighborhoods and Brightmoor started to invite us in. And it was something that the leaders there, Sonia, Zena, Felicia, Kirk, the Rev, were teaching us the importance of long-term relationships. I can do certain things to perform to you that I'm doing my work. But it doesn't matter if you're not there 3 years from now. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake, if you still have the relationship. So for me, because you asked a question about going deep on relationships, to me, that's where now I start telling my truth.
Yeah.
That's when people start telling me truths. And in philanthropy and the work that I do, it's hard to get to the truth. Mm-hmm. It's really hard unless you're really honest and open and vulnerable, and you ask for it. So,
I know Ken's gonna have some questions. So this made me think about something, like hearing you talk about that, because I've also heard you at times talk about, and even on camera say, you feel the call to go and talk to your brothers, other white men, right, about some of the things that you're learning.
Yeah.
So, but I also know that, this space can be challenging for white men at times.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can walk into rooms where it can feel like you can do no right? Even if you come in there with the best intentions.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna talk a little bit about myself before asking a question. Sometimes it feels lonely, right? Sometimes it feels lonely. Sometimes I'm in spaces with other black leaders, and I have been in places where I've said something challenging to someone in a position of power, and I felt alone. I shouldn't say that. There was one other person that acknowledged me in that space in real time. There were others that kind of came after the fact to say that they were in agreement, but in that moment it felt like really, really lonely, right? And then I've also been in, majority white spaces where I had to say something that was challenging. And now the spotlight's on, and, people are hearing something that's challenging to them for the first time and having all types of emotions going along with that. Sometimes it can feel like really, really lonely.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's your experience, or what your experience is, what emotion kind of like is the dominant one in those moments. But can you talk a little bit about what that's like for you?
Yeah, I can. And it's in part to the relationships I have that I've learned a lot of things, right? So I want to thank you both for allowing me to be on the ride with you, because I've heard I've heard stories. We've talked about stories together, and I think that's really important. I'll tell you what my dominant feeling was for a really long time, and sort of where I'm going now, because things are changing a little bit for me, and it's been relatively recent. I think the dominant feeling I've had is mostly fear. Mm-hmm. Mostly fear. Like, vulnerability is one thing, but I'm not really vulnerable in the sense of, you said once, I remember, Dwan, you said something about, people who worry about losing their jobs, and they said they probably haven't been broke before. Okay, so if you've been broke before, you don't worry as much, maybe, because you've been there. So
You don't want to go back, but you're like, I survived that.
You survived
I can survive it again if I need to.
Right. And so I've never been broke. I've also never been fired. And even if I were, I probably would be okay. And so, but the fear is that somebody's going to say, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you're an idiot, or, you're a racist. Why are you so insensitive? Why would you say that? And then my reputation, could be on the line. And is that important? Yeah, it's important. But what I've found in this work is that I'm actually willing to have my reputation changed. I think a lot of people have said early days when I started in philanthropy, different from when I was raising money for 15 years, is that, like, how can you work with such different kinds of folks in the family, and and I would say I'm a peacemaker. I was the baby in my family, but I was still the peacemaker. So I was really good at sort of molding in and out of places, and with being able to walk into any room and not have anybody really challenge me too much, especially when I started working for a foundation. So it was mostly fear about, am I going to say something that's going to reflect poorly on the family that I work for, the Fisher family? Am I going to, and they didn't sign up for this. Right. They signed up for me, but they didn't sign up for what I'm about to say. And I should say to the camera that this is, I speak for myself.
That's it.
This is a speak for yourself.
Right.
So I don't have that fear at this moment. But so predominantly it was fear. And actually recently I really dug into like, what's the fear? I wrote it down because I'm starting to think about like, I've been working with Mike Rafferty, I know you guys know, at New Detroit.
Shout out to Mike.
Shout out to Mike, and I've learned so much from him. And he, David Campt and I, and some of the folks on his team are building sort of like it's a session for white men in particular to work alongside black leaders, but to do our work, right? So I started really detailing, what's my fear? Like, what am I afraid of, right? And as soon as I started writing it down, something started to click. And here's the change. Here's the more recent change. The more recent change is there used to be 2 sentences or phrases from black leaders that used to absolutely confound me. Like, I was like, I don't get it. Like, how, I'll never get this right now. And so one is MLK, when his letter from the Birmingham jail, which was, the white moderate is the real problem, okay? And I was like, how could that be? And I would be in conversations with other, white male leaders and saying, how is it that if I were a member of the KKK, somehow, in that letter, it's just the letter, it's just one person, I'm not attributing it to anybody other than this letter. How is that like, I'll never get it right. That proves it. I'll never get it right. And then James Baldwin, in his letter to his nephew in 1962, said to his nephew, who was named James, sorry, old buddy, but you're going to have to accept these people with love because they don't understand that they were brought up in a world to believe things that aren't true. And so we're going to have to accept them with love until because their liberation, our liberation is tied to theirs. Okay, so that's the shift for me, is that actually what I'm seeing is that being liberated from my fear of this, because I have said things that have not come off well. I've said them in large settings, and I've been targeted as, and that's okay, sometimes I'm a picture of the system. There was a time that I think you'll remember that you and I were at a party together and I said something, and you know what, it was wrong. What I said was wrong. I was trying to sort of stretch a little bit, and I was talking to another white leader, and I said something kind of stupid. And he challenged me, and I was like, I was trying to take the rope-a-dope during the, but I was like, yeah, that was stupid. And then, you were nearby, and you were like, hey man, I know this guy's heart. And so I've changed from being fearful of that to being curious and to looking for my own liberation to be able to say, yeah, I've got a lot to learn, and I'm going to read about it. I'm going to build relationships where I can, and I got to still make mistakes. We have to be more comfortable making mistakes. Yeah.
Yep. Especially knowing when your heart is. I mean, you do have a tendency of saying the wrong thing. I'll give you a good example in a minute.
Oh, okay.
So an example you don't even know, you wouldn't even remember. Okay. But I'm going to give it to you in a minute.
Okay, good.
But,
you got me tuned in.
But before I go there, I think what I appreciate about you is that you definitely take the time to learn from black leaders and intentionally learn from black leaders and let it stick with you to train up, to share with others. And you're saying still having that era of fear of how it can come off, but yet going along with it, right? And so I truly appreciate that. But where I go with you saying the wrong things at times.
Yeah.
So when I first met you, Doug, I don't know if you're gonna remember this.
I do remember.
It was when I was with Big Green.
Yeah.
And so I go to the foundation with Carol Illich, right? And so, this is my first time, I'm into fund development, as an executive director, raising money, and you really, just trying to figure out how to do this. We don't know how to do this. We're trying to learn how to do it, right? And so, we're talking to Doug about getting some money to build a garden in one of the elementary schools in Brightmoor. And then Doug, being who Doug is, was like, well, we'll think about this. He said, but what I want you to do is meet with Larry Simmons, right? Need you to meet with Larry Simmons and meet with this person, and talk to them about, is this what Brightmoor needs? Is this what Brightmoor wants, right? And so what I respect about that, of course, is you just making sure to live to the mantra of how it goes, it's not for us without us, right? You can't do for us without us, right? And I think you put that top of mind. But where the statement comes in, that is Doug was like, but be careful, because they'll see a development person a mile away. And I said, is this white man telling me I ain't black enough?
Oh.
Like, that's what I read from that statement.
That's
That the white guy's telling me that I can't go in a room full of black people and be black enough that I'm gonna come off as this development, person. And so I walked away from that meeting actually extremely irritated by that statement. And the reason why being,
I didn't know that.
Because you spend a lot of time wanting to portray something, imposter syndrome, right? To where someone tells you this is how you have to be successful, right? And so you practice that, you learn that, you need to do that, and especially in spaces that you're new to, that you've never been in before, with people with a whole bunch of money. First time a kid from Saginaw is in a room with millionaires. Every single person at the table is a millionaire, and I'm a kid from Saginaw, from the hood, right? So really learning into that. So as much as it irritated me to where I'm like, well, I'm accept the compliment because I'm finally where I want to be, sounding like a development person, right? But then I also learned from that. I was like, but a white man think that I ain't authentic enough. That's an issue for me. And it was a real, and I actually walked away from a lesson with that. I was like, a white man is never ever going to tell me I'm that again, right? So it was something that I was doing in how I was coming off, right? And so I was like, let me change this a little bit. And I went to being more authentic. Now I'm probably a little too authentic, but and just say what I want to say all the time. But I did move towards, no, I'm gonna show up as me pretty much all the time. Because, and I was talking with like some of my old mentors who were, Caucasian as well. And it was like, yeah, Ken, people love Ken. They don't love this perception that you have, that you have to talk a certain way, you have to sit a certain way, you have to act a certain way. People love Ken for Ken. We all love Ken for Ken. And so I had that conversation with her after that too. Right? And it really helped me out in just really coming back to being authentically me. When I was learning how to be a fund developer, an executive director, and all of that stuff. So it's a two parts to that story, to where you say some wild stuff, Doug, because a white guy telling a black guy he ain't black enough is weird as fuck.
Yeah,
but
that is. And I'm sorry, man.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one of the things that I've got to work on, because what I hear you say is that you also didn't feel, and I get it, man, the power dynamics in philanthropy. I mean, doesn't go beyond me that I'm a 6'2" white guy that runs a foundation in a predominantly black, majority black city. Okay, 80 to 90%. So even regardless of how I might appear, there's a power dynamic. We're in that room together, and so what I hope in the long run is that I'll get to a place where if I do continue to say bad things or off things or just uninformed things, that I want to appear to be authentic enough where someone can say, now did you mean to say to me? But that's not your responsibility.
Right.
Okay, it's my responsibility to learn this stuff. So I appreciate you telling me, even though it's years later. No, I do. I do. So I really do.
I will not necessarily push back on you, because I know that's what like you learning, but I'll just push back on that for the listeners as well, right? It's like that onus is on us at the same time, right? It's like if we continue to like not acknowledge, be able to define, articulate, and point out our power when we come to those places, the power dynamics remain.
Say that again.
If we aren't able to, and I'm talking about black people that work in this space, maybe not running a foundation, but in any capacity, if they are running a foundation or if they are running a nonprofit, if we can't come into that space and articulate, define, and realize the power that we conduct and we bring into that space, then it will feel like the power dynamics are skewed, right? But if we are able to understand that and walk into that space and be able to say, hey, like, you can't change the world with your dollars without us, right?
And that takes some learning.
That will stay. It does.
That takes some training, some learning.
It does. It does.
And some
takes
mentors.
learning. It's a different. it's foreign. The
Yeah,
concept
it
is
is.
foreign, right? We don't see it happening on a consistent basis. But I think to your fear a little bit, and even the way some of the things that Ken just expressed, Jane Elliott talked about being in a space where she was talking to a group of white people, and one of the things that someone asked her, well, do you think that like just we are all racist, like all white people are racist? So her response was this: if you grew up in the United States and you were educated at least up until the 12th grade and you are not, you weren't listening, right? So what she was saying is it's in the water, right? Like you're trained and taught to be. It's not the end of the world, I think is what she was saying. I'd asked a friend of ours, Chris Lambert, once on a live recorded video, you could find it, about like, was he a racist? And in real time, he said, I am. He said, I think I am a racist. He said, but I'm also an anti-racist at the same time.
Yeah.
And that was powerful. We hadn't rehearsed that. I did not know that was going to be his response. But what Jane Elliott didn't say in that is what I believe is true at the same time is if you are black and you grew up and made it to a certain level of education here in the United States and you don't have an inferiority complex to white people, you weren't listening, right? Because you're being taught that at the same time. Again, it's not the end of the world, right? When you talk about imposter syndrome and all of that, right? It's like you know now that you belong in whatever space you are in. You know what I mean? I've heard you say that before. You know, and so I think that it's not the end of the world, but if we can do the work to unlearn some of that and learn more truth, then we're all a better place. It's not the end of the world to have an inferiority complex. I've had one many years ago, you know what I mean? I acknowledged it, recognized it, and was like, let me unlearn this, you know what I mean? So, you know, yeah.
Can I add to something
Yeah.
on that? One of the things that that I've started to have to work on is some code switching with my brothers. Okay, because there are, So there are many who look like me who would not have been able to answer the question like Chris did. And partly it's because that even, you know, so I watch Fox News, I watch PBS News, I'm watching, because I need to absorb it all, I really do. And, you know, we work in Israel, so I follow lots of different, you know, media components, whether it's pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli, pro-human. Okay, and there are many people who grew up, and the definition of racist is all those things that, you know, in Robin DiAngelo's book around white fragility, right? That there's good and bad, and that if you are racist, this is what you've done. If you're a white supremacist, holy cow. So Fox News and PBS News, you know, conservative liberal media still use those words to mean the old things. They don't, you know, there might be somebody on there talking about systemic racism and the white supremacy culture, right? But when a reporter is reporting, when they say white supremacy group, they don't mean insert just any group. They mean a white supremacist group. And so what I've begun to do from a code switching standpoint is that because I believe that with the definition of racism being that if you are a part of a dominant group that is creating and supporting systemic measures that keep you in power and keep equity, you know, gaps growing and all of that, then yeah, that is a racist system. And if the definition is you're part of the dominant group, then yeah, you are. But to Chris's point, if you work inside it, you can be an anti-racist. But the code switching I'm doing is that I've talked to white men who have said, look, Doug, I'm like, okay, don't ask me a question. Like, I didn't write these books, you know? They're like, but tell me, I had a friend, Ryan, from grad school who said, Doug, if I believe that I am part of a dominant culture that has more opportunities than others, that I'm inside a system that I help hold up every day, And I have to acknowledge the fact that I need to begin to build new relationships and break down the system that's built to keep me in place. So he goes on like this. He said, do I have to call myself racist? And I was like, you know what, Ryan? What I'm going to say to you is that you do what you got to do. But if you're going to sit in a room in certain places where I am, if you don't say that, they're not going to hear. They may not believe that you've got it. So if you believe all those things, then the shortcut for that is, in certain circles, that, yeah, you are part of the racist culture. You are. But no, you don't have to go to your this place that he worked and say all this, because people would say, holy cow, man, what are you doing on the weekends? So I started, to code switch just in that, if I don't say those things in certain areas, but in other spots, they're like, this guy, until I've built the relationship. Yeah. You have to build these relationships, I think.
That took some learning for me, right? Because
for me, doesn't mean that everybody has to code switch like that.
Calling all cyclists, we're talking about the two-wheel pedal pushers that love a good long ride. It's the Ride for Equity kickoff from Detroit to Ferndale and back. It's the first leg of a 7-day ride from Detroit to Mackinac. To register, go to bldrideforequity.org. This ride is to raise funds for Black entrepreneurs and bring awareness to the importance of equitable funding practices. It's 7 days of biking from Detroit to Mackinac, and it all starts at the Big Ride for Equity kickoff from Detroit to Ferndale. Go to bldrideforequity.org to register. Are you ready to ride?
Well, I try to stay away from code switching, but I think that I believe in communicating in a way that's going to come across to the people that are listening, right? Yeah. So if that's code switching when I do that, then it's okay. I'm okay with that.
I've seen you in so many different venues speak your absolute truth. Yeah. And it's been, whether it takes courage or not for you to do it, it looks courageous on the outside.
Yeah. That's important for me. I have to sleep well at night, and I can't sleep well at night if I am not authentic in those spaces in particular. But I was, I used to do trainings and teachings for like groups, and it would be mixed groups. Most of the time, people that identified as Christian or, Jesus followers or what have you. And what would kind of frequently happen is you get some people that would come there would want to learn and came there to learn, and then you'd also get some people that came there to prove that this was not necessary.
Yeah.
And
and it's funny, that happens in every case, don't it? In every situation, people want to learn and people want to prove this ain't necessary. It's a whole bunch of bull crap.
Or just fight against it. They didn't necessarily come to learn. They may believe it's true, but they're like, I'm getting ready. I came here for a fight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's almost
and to
across
bring
the board.
disruption.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if they didn't, they may not have thought they came to bring disruption. They may think that they're coming to bring more truth.
More truth,
You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's disruptive. And I've definitely noticed that there were certain terms like white supremacy or like systematic racism and oppression that people just could not come to grips with. And then you'd spend too much time trying to explain why this was this, and somebody was just pointing it out to make another point. Yeah. So I understand, like, strategically why you would, and if it's effective and you end up getting the end result, which is hopefully the world just got better because some people just learned something and are looking for ways to grow, stretch, and change to make things better for the whole. Like, I appreciate it, I respect it. As someone that really believes in reparations and I feel like I'm called to figure out how to get reparations, you know what I mean? I'm okay with not calling it reparations at times.
Yeah, and I know that not everybody agrees with this particular, and it's not the right thing all the time. I have a very close colleague, Meredith Freeman, who I respect so much. And we all have different like I need to work. I see my work to be in the brackish water of the people who are like willing and willing adjacent, because I think that there's a lot of, there's just so much good that comes from this, and building long-term relationships and seeing things you haven't seen before and making things better. We can actually change it if we can actually see the system and see our role in it. Yeah. But I don't mind working in the brackish water. Some people are like, I'm not spending time in the group that's only willing adjacent. We're not asking for permission anymore. We're just doing our thing. The women at Birth Detroit, Leslie Welch and others, say that same thing. We're not asking for permission anymore. And I find a lot of strength and courage in how, and I shouldn't speak for Meredith, because she should speak for herself during one of these.
No doubt. We got to get Meredith on. And shout out to Meredith.
Shout out to Meredith and Kamara Morgan and my whole team. I should list them all now that I've listed two. Anyways, that not everybody wants to work in, they're just like, I'm not going to convince other people this is what I'm doing. But I think, especially as a white man, I got to talk to there's a lot of us in this brackish water.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think we all can identify where we're supposed to be. You know what I mean? And I fully understand, when black people are like, I'm not going to do that, right? Like, let them fix them, you know what I mean? Meaning white people work with white people, you know what I mean?
Except that one time when I told you, not except, I just think it's fun. The one time I told you about that group of white men that we've got together, and it's just a quiet little group, and it's like we're supporting each other, and then you said, you should say what you said, but it was just more like, what did you say? You were like, maybe you guys need to check in every once in a while, right? Something like that. And I was like,
said the thought of white people, like teaching white people on this subject matter, terrifies me.
Okay, that's exactly
right. Without any type of consultation from a black person,
right,
or a person of color at all.
Yeah, because but I get it. Like that's like, I know that that's a whole school of thought, right? It's like, no, like it's up to them to fix them, is what will be said in spaces.
Right.
And I get that, because it's exhausting, it's heavy, but it's also painful, right? Like when we come into that space, especially with the mixed group, like we're bringing trauma with us, and sometimes in order to convince some people that this is even necessary, we have to share the story. Share our own personal story of how it's still happening today. You know what I mean?
And I think sometimes you got to work through it, like from their point in their group, you have to work through it in your group first, or at least try to get a basis of understanding, and then bring, in my opinion, I won't use the term outside, but bring in another group, because now you're better prepared to understand, better prepared to talk, because the other group is going to come in like, this is what we want, you know what I mean? So example, if I look at it gender basis, right? Us three considering to have a conversation about gender relationships all day long and try to teach each other and be better men. But at some point we do have to bring a woman in to help us identify the gaps that we don't see, and what's truly nonsense and what they don't even care about, that we might have thought was a huge concern.
Yeah, we'll get so far. We'll get so far, right? We will hopefully share what the women in our lives have taught us about like our own ways and errors and how we can grow. But like, it's still that's gonna be a cap.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because I still mess up all the time.
Yep.
One of the friends that we have in common, Jacques Panisse, right? Remember in some early conversations, he was like, we have to be better at talking to each other, right? Yeah. So to your point, right, if there's a group of white guys doing their work, if ultimately that's all we do, and we don't build authentic relationships, and we're not learning how to talk to each other, and getting each other's endorsement, so that if you hear somebody in the community say that Doug said something stupid to Ken, and I use stupid just to be silly, but said something that was maybe made him feel a certain way, less than, or just anything, that you could say to Ken, hey man, you should talk to him about it, because he wants to learn, right? And then we talk about it. But it's not your responsibility to teach me in that moment, right? Because then you're putting other things on the line. I've had folks, I've been called out plenty of times, called in. I had somebody talk to me 4 months after I was on a panel, and she called me 4 months later to tell me something I had said had made her feel diminished. And so that was really, and then I had learned enough at that point to say, or do you have the energy to talk to me more about how I could have done it differently? Because if you don't, I got it. I got it. It's a check, and I got it. But if you do have energy, and she was like, I got energy all day for this. Yeah. And I was like, all right. So we had like 3 different phone calls.
4 months worth of energy.
4 months.
Yeah, 4 months.
For your ass.
Right, I've been waiting for you. But it's interesting because that's again where I was, talked to you earlier about it, how I appreciate that and value that in what you do. Because to be honest, in total transparency and going back to the gender thing, I think if I'm trying my best, I'm speaking of me. I'm trying my best and I'm learning and I'm on the road and I think I'm doing great. And then someone's boom poking holes at me. I probably wouldn't take it as well as you took it. Understood. You know what I mean? I think Dwan will, because I know his character. I know he'll come bitch me a little bit about it, and then he'll meet with the person and learn. Right? Me, initially, I'll just be like, man, screw that. I don't, how dare they? I'm doing this, that, and the other, right? So I'm trying to learn how to be a better person as well. Because it is hard when you think you're doing the work, and then somebody come poking holes saying, well, you're not doing good enough, right? And so, again, just a credit to you. And like I said, I've recognized him doing that as well. Because some of us can't move as well as that, to take that kind of criticism when we feel we are working really hard to build bridges.
Well, and so even if we shift into philanthropy, right? We've been talking about cross-racial and the power dynamics. Dwan, you said something to me years ago that landed really well and hard with me, which was sharing resources is one thing, sharing power is another. And so even in our relationships, the people that work at foundations who, whether they're the ones that earn the money or not, this money is still in public trust. This is not their money anymore. If it's in a foundation, it's not. So even if it's in their checkbook, I would wrestle a little bit with that. They're still holding the community's trust. And the kind of relationship that I really want with our grant partners at the Fisher Foundation is that they can check us, right? They can criticize the work that we do. They can say, we almost got fired once at Brightmoor as a funder. And
when you say that, what do you mean?
What I mean is that about 4 years or so into a relationship with a grant partner, we were way inside and still are in relationships with the leaders and the neighbors inside Brightmoor, because what we see, and look, we do work in the city as well as Brightmoor. We do work in Florida and the Palm Beach County, and we also do a lot of work in Israel. So it's not just in Brightmoor where we're building these relationships. But so we were probably 4 years or 5 years into a grant partner relationship. But because we're on the ground so much in Brightmoor, and we know the Sonia, Zeno, Rev, and others, there was a family in the neighborhood who had a complaint about the grant partner, the group. And they found their way to us. And so we listened. We listened to the family. And so I thought, and this is sort of a white supremacy thing, I think, based on what I'm learning, I was like, I'm going to call the group and figure out what's going on. So I called the group and I was like, hey, this is what I heard and this, that, and the other. And they were like, okay, well, and they were being really cautious, I think.
Because I was like, how much shit I heard about y'all? Right. That I ain't called you about. How much shit I done heard about.
All right, so they didn't say that.
That's probably what they was thinking. But go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's very fair. All right. We've now been with the same organization now for 15 years, so they've told us.
Good.
They've told us. But so what they said was like, you know what? It took a little while, but they were like, you're in the wrong spot. They're like, you're inside a privacy zone that we need, because we need to be speaking. And if you're going to get inside this that close and you're going to let this happen, we don't need your money. Like, we can't do this, right? We've got arguments we have to have. There's sometimes we want you in those arguments. There's sometimes we don't. This is one of the ones we don't. And so
that is identifying their power.
Right?
That is what they did in that moment. They understood.
Right? And so did I. At that very moment. It was like, okay. And that's happened to us in Brightmoor many times. And sometimes it's because white men, what we think in philanthropy is that we're coming with solutions. I mean, come on. No, there's a wonderful story, if you want me to share, Mrs. Fisher and what she would say, and what I learned from her about the fact that the gift that's being given is not the money that gets transacted. It's the families that are allowing us into their lives, who they have the power, they have the tools. This money is it's like oil. It's inert until you put it into something, until somebody lets you into their lives. They're making a gift too. They're trusting you. Yeah. So power dynamics in philanthropy. I mean, I think things are going to change as the years go on. I'm hopeful to see that. I'm working on that in certain ways.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they'll definitely change. But again, it's difficult. Like I said, it's difficult, especially with new people entering as service providers who just trying to get the work done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Most people come from whatever they're trying to fix, that's what they're coming from. You know, in a lot of cases, right? And so that's what they're focused on.
Yeah.
And they just need the money to help do it. And sometimes just naturally fall into that power dynamic. I do think you just came up with one of our subjects for More Money, More Impact is leveraging your power. So that will be one of the that will be one of the topics. Let's switch gears.
We got the bike ride. We got to talk about the bike ride. Sharia's gonna kill at least one of us.
I was thinking of it.
But at least one.
It's gonna be all three of us.
She gonna see us before she see him. So she gonna kill one of us.
She's gonna make me wear a small jersey.
Right.
That's what Sharia's
make me wear one
gonna
of those small.
Just a little small.
Here's a medium for you.
Is this extra large? This doesn't feel extra large.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So you've ridden on the bike ride with us every year. Every year. The last 2 years you went the whole way.
Yep.
The year before it was pretty much just you and Dwan that went the whole entire route.
Yeah.
He might have the most miles clocked
besides
outside of me.
Outside of you, right. So just talk a little bit about that, Doug. Like why? And I think 1 year was your birthday, right? Or was 2 years your birthday?
2 years. It was 3. Well,
no, it was his birthday was the first year because that was the year we were in September.
That's right.
Oh yeah, that's right. Right.
So I have to say, the first year that you did it, I'd heard that you were doing it, and then all of a sudden I got this text from David Contour, and he was down at the launch, and I was like, how did I not jump on this thing right away? And so I saw the number of days, and I was like, where are you going to be? And I think it was a Wednesday or whatever, and Dwan was kind enough to say, this is where we'll be, and you can come up. So I zipped up there for that one day.
You rented a U-Haul.
I did.
And put your bike in a U-Haul.
Cheaper. Well, I had to put my car in one spot and the U-Haul, so I took the U-Haul to bring,
I was like, man, he went through a lot to get here. I appreciated it.
Oh, man. And it was so good. And I remember the pictures when we stopped a couple of times. So,
just had Tyler.
Year two.
Okay.
The ride. So one of the things I think, for one thing, I love this ride. I never challenged myself that physically before, ever, right? And so to do that and to be alongside you all and to be able to follow you, right? Like physically follow your lead, to be a part of the team. That first year when I came up for the one night and Martez was there and a number of guys were there and we were having dinner and it was sort of like, man, I wonder if these guys are going to even accept me. I was just there for that one night because I went up to Claire. But so the second and the third years, the Speak For You sessions that take place in Saginaw, hometown hero, Saginaw, it's such a wonderful, triumphant return for you. And so that's so much fun to watch. But the stories at the Speak For Yourself, not only is this like a physical ride, it's the metaphorical ride that some people have so much of a hard time to get up to the Mackinac Policy Conference and to access to so much else. I don't even go to the Mackinac Policy Conference because I think they don't need another 6'2" white guy who runs a foundation on the island at that time. They don't. But the ride, so we really get to know each other, right? Yeah. We get to laugh together. Sometimes somebody gets injured and then even that it's not funny when it happened.
No,
but it was funny when he was like, when he came back and he was like, hey, no, somebody told us that he wanted to go back to where he fell.
Right, and start riding.
And we were ridden the whole day, right?
Like, no, I'm not doing that.
Well,
it was funny when he said that the camera get it. Then it became funny.
Right.
Like, what?
But,
That's your concern?
Yeah.
That was.
And right. And so that, just, and the being able to be together at night.
Yeah.
And Ken, when you shared your story when we had that super small Speak for Yourself.
Yeah, Claire.
And
Claire.
Yeah.
And I had a chance to hear your story, just one of your stories, and then see the reaction to it, and then see one of the other young guys on the ride say he had never heard certain things. And it's like, man, you have to be with people to build relationships, and to do it during a time when we're doing this really important thing, raising money for BLD, raising money for these amazing entrepreneurs that should, if we lived in a just world, we wouldn't have problem getting access to capital.
Right.
You've heard me say before that if we lived in a just world, you wouldn't have to be out raising this money. It would be chasing you.
Yeah.
Now, I still haven't finished my application to you all to give you the money. I felt like I needed to do that before I came here today, but I still feel like we're earning the right to be able to be a part of this partnership.
Yeah.
But the ride, man, it's just a blast. I would not miss it. And the money goes into this amazing body of work. You get to know, the folks that are behind it, and then the people that come for the Speak for Yourself. I'm hoping that this year we have. We've talked about this. A Speak for Ourselves, just the group, the guys that are riding, stuff like that.
Yeah,
where we can just talk with each other.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's the best.
Yeah.
And you're doing the whole ride again this year, right?
Yeah.
Now, is there some like some calf training that you do? This
is the thing. So we should tell. Maybe this ends up on the cutting room floor.
Because it is the most intimidating. And Dwan will say this too. The most intimidating
he hasn't
thing
said this before.
It's like it's cool when you ride with people, when you going and you moving and you feeling good, and then when you get behind Doug, it doesn't even matter how fast you're going. It isn't until you look at his calves that you get intimidated. Like, well, this sucks. Because your calves are as big as Dwan's head.
Right.
That's pretty big.
Touche.
That's huge.
Dude,
yeah.
I'd like to think that they're trim.
It is. Like, I agree. Like, I would say, if I didn't know you both a little better, I think that you had the same silicone injections in your calves that Ken is putting his shoulders in his arms. I think you had the same doctor. You know what I mean? But I know you better.
Dude. Yeah.
I'm trying to grow my shoulders to catch up with your staff, with your calves.
I know, man. I know.
And then Richard Kite as well. I don't know. Richard is like
those are meat. Like
crazy.
It's like a turkey leg, right?
It's crazy.
So I'd like to say that mine are more sinuous.
Is that what it is?
Have more lines and stuff, right? This is just.
But it's just funny because you watching you work, riding a bike, and I look at my legs like, dude, this is embarrassing. Like,
but you're learning 3D printing, right?
Like,
so you can just
make some calves.
Just put some calves. He using it all up here, them silicones. He getting all the injections in his upper body tears. He gotta save some of it.
I gotta save some for my calves.
That's like asking Tez, make sure that my legs behind these tables.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You up here, right?
you got waist up shots, right?
We gotta get you out of here, Doug. We know we can talk forever, but did you want to share? I know you touched on it, but did you want to share like the one story that came from the Speak for Yourself in Claire that resonated with you the most?
Yeah, I mean, and Ken, I'd have to ask Ken's permission for telling any portion of his story because it was, and maybe we can do that at a different.
Well, mine's a little longer. You can do the other one.
Okay.
I think mine's a little bit longer. I don't know if you got that much time.
Well, what I would share is that at the Speak for Yourself, this was in Claire, and there were 4 people that showed up, and one of the people was the organizer.
Right.
So there were 3 people that showed up.
Small group.
2 women and 1 guy. And one of the best things that, Dwan, you do at every Speak for Yourself session is you say, at least you have been, when we're doing this, some people are trumpets, tubas, and some people are flutes. Mm-hmm. So he said, so if you're a tuba, make room for flutes, because sometimes they need to say some things too. So Ken had told a story that was really personal to you because one of the three people who was there was really reluctant, hadn't said anything, right? And then so I asked the guy, I said, Jim, are you a flute? He was like, what? I was like fighting his eyes, right? Happened to be a white older guy from Clare. And so
Saginaw. He lived in Clare.
He lived in Clare, but he's from Saginaw. He's from Saginaw.
Oh, he was from Saginaw. Okay, because I forgot that. So, but he just started like he let loose. He was like, why don't you people blah blah, right? That's how he started out.
Yeah.
And so you had said, and I won't go into your whole story. That's for you to share. But you had said this really wonderful thing. You had said, Jim, would you be willing to hear my story? And he said, yeah, whatever, And then you told a story about having been pulled over a handful of times and how that made you feel dehumanized. And, so again, I don't want to minimize that story. You had, I know it word for word because it made such an impression on me. And then even Jim said something like, man, if a cop did that to me, I'd beat the hell out of him and all that stuff. And you're like, yeah, well, if you beat the hell out of a cop, you probably get a ride home.
Right.
If I beat the hell out of a cop, I probably wouldn't go home, right?
Yeah.
And I really think it made a difference to Jim. But what happened was that at the end, then you said, what about your story, right? And Jim, this older guy, said, you don't hear my story. And you were like, no, I want to hear your story. So Jim starts telling the story saying he was brought up on the wrong side of the tracks and that one of his teachers told him he would never amount to anything. Right when he said that, Kevin, who used to work at BLD, said, what? Like almost just right that. He said, wait.
Yeah.
What did you just say? And Jim said, what? My teacher said I wouldn't amount to anything. She said I'd be in jail. And he was like, never heard a white man say that. I thought, you guys, I didn't think. And so what I saw in that moment, there was only like 7 of us riders, 4 people, with one being the organizer, right, was to see probably 70-year-old white guy from Saginaw living in Clare, listening to a story that actually had an impact on him, then got offered to share his story, then he did it. So he must have felt honored enough that we were going to listen, that you were going to listen, and that it made an impact on Kevin and others in the room by saying, I'd never heard a white guy say that before. So it goes back to this, thing that we've talked about, which is we have to be better at talking to each other, better at being vulnerable. And after you ride 60 miles and you're at the end of it, and people are opening up their hearts, that's some really loving, vulnerable, magic stuff.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank Jim, for sharing.
Thanks, Jim.
And Ken and also Kevin, right? It was Kevin who's brilliant mind. I know that he grew up on 7 Mile, and I think a combination of Highland Park and 7 Mile, and is graduate of MSU.
Go State.
Part of a very well known fraternity, and I'm sure that without him being here to say this, he has. He makes sure that when he's in a room, you understand how sharp he is, and he's very sharp.
Yeah, he is.
To be able to say that, I can only imagine people that have assumed that he wasn't going to be. You know what I mean? And all of that, and to say, damn, somebody said that about you. You know what I mean? I thought that was.
I only had that
set
fight.
aside only for us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I've proven them wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yep.
I appreciate. Yeah, thanks for bringing that, and we hope that you all would come out and join us and share your story.
Join us when?
May 19th is the kickoff, so we're going May 19th to May 25th. We're going to ride from Detroit to Mackinac. It's only 377 miles.
You can do it.
You can do it. We can do it.
Or you can just do the Ferndale.
You can do it.
Or you just do the 4 miles to Ferndale.
Right. Yeah.
Each way, though.
You can
Yeah,
do the short ride to Ferndale if you want to come out and hang out with us and just celebrate the ride, see us off well. And if you can't do either, you can always sign up to donate at blackleadersdetroit.org. It is a fundraiser, but we'd love to see you and hear from you. That's it for us.
That's it.
Peace.
Thanks, Doug.
Peace.
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 I think at one point when you trying to learn a what up doe or
Oh man.
We should actually do that.
I know that's a trap. That feels like a trap to me, man. I swear to God.